Hail Varsity Radio Saturday morning show, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Strap yourselves in. Here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt.
Y'all don't even know he was a virgin until he's 28, and now, roll tide.
And Mark Kraynak.
Time has come for someone to put his foot down. And that foot is me.
Welcome to it. Weekend editions here. It's Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Chris Schmidt, Mark Kraynak, Elijah Herbel, as we load up here a week away from the spring game, Nebraska v. Nebraska. Numbers to get in this morning can join us on Hail Varsity, 466-3776, 466-3776, 800-825-5865. Can email the show, Chris at hailvarsity.com, and get a hold of us on Twitter. Give Hail Varsity a follow. Give ESPN Lincoln a follow at ESPN Lincoln, at Schmidt_radio. Chris Schmidt, that's me. At Herbal Essence for Elijah Herbel. And Mark Kraynak used to have a really good Twitter handle. It is no more. Kraynak, what's the good word, brother? How are you?
Can't believe it's a week, right?
I know, we've been doing time waiting for this thing.
My sound is weird.
No, you sound great.
Oh, good. Okay. That's awesome. Yeah, good morning, man. It is only a week away. And that'll be good. By the way, got really good seats for the spring game because, it's a little bit different. You put in your request, and then you get seated in a different spot than you would if you have season tickets. And that part's pretty cool. Part's pretty cool.
What suite did you wrangle?
I didn't get that, but I just got in and around 50-yard line, which is good.
It's like, I love my kids. I didn't get the suite. No, I'm messing with you. We have a triple header of baseball next Saturday, which is great.
Oh, triple header.
Yeah, well, like a triangular,
Yeah.
Ooh. So I might be off. We might just have two. I don't know, but figure that out.
Oof.
So
yeah,
we're all set up, man, just to lay it out for you. So Single Barrel, love that place. Get the butcher's board, first and foremost. That is an obscene serving of meat. It's phenomenal. We're going to be at the, the single.
Is it sort of like is charcuterie stuff or what?
Well, no, it's two different steaks. All right.
Oh,
it's their homemade brisket. It's a slab of ribs. They have Béarnaise sauce with one of these steaks.
Jeez.
What else does it come with? A burger. Oh, a burger.
Wow.
A burger. And
I thought you were going charcuterie. I thought it was going to be a handful of random sausages and then some small pickles and like some mustard and.
Thank you.
Wow.
And they have some sausage there too.
Oh, you're welcome.
So wow. Yeah, that's the full meal deal, bro. And so when you go to the Single Barrel, either Friday or Saturday, to come by and say hi and get some cool gear, get the butcher's board, and you'll be so happy. So shameless plug. 4 to 6 Friday, 9:30 to 11:30 in front of kickoff on Saturday. Yay!
How about that butcher board for breakfast? How about the butcher board for breakfast?
And then one for after the game. One for after the game. That's the way to do it.
And then one for dessert.
Sure, just roll with it that way. Kraynak, it's been interesting this week, and momentum's a good thing. Optimism's a real thing with spring football. And then this week didn't disappoint when you listen to the coaches and you listen to the players. We'll get some thoughts from Rob Zatechka coming up here in a little longer rewind. He was with us yesterday. So, I listened to Dawson talk about the young guys getting the reps, but needing the development, and they're not there yet, but man, they're putting the work in. You listen to the tight ends, and of course Coach Beckton's like they're getting some work in, and then I was really kind of impressed with Oliver Martin, and just he's a quiet dude that just kind of laid out there. Just you could just tell how frustrated he was with the injury. Right, we saw him against Illinois, and then he was really never the same because he just had this nagging issue where he couldn't really bend his leg, and finally he got back on the field. But he was just so dejected. And think of his journey, like Iowa, Michigan, whatever order, and then I think it was Michigan, then Iowa, and then Lincoln. So he finally gets to play, and then he has to miss so much time, and he was just bummed out. But he spent time talking about how he really connected with Mickey Joseph. He touched on how we get pressed all the time in coverage, we being the wide receiver group. You heard Frost talk a lot last year about guys needing to get separation, right? And then he talked about just all the stuff that Mickey's taught those guys that is probably pretty common. But I think the difference, this is a jump to conclusion, I think there's some of these new coaches that some of the kids really feel like, well, these guys have made an effort to connect with me. And I think Joseph's one of those guys. He's an old pro. He's phenomenal. But just case in point here, Oliver Martin, Kraynak, is a guy that I think is pretty excited, A, about staying healthy, but B, is pretty wowed. And then the last part of this week, as we review the optimism of spring, Martin talked about having answers for everything and the multiplicity. And, we're multiple. What's your offensive identity, Kraynak? Well, we're multiple, right? I mean, how many times has that been said? But it sounds like
that goes back to Solich.
Yeah, it does. But that goes back to to Lombardi, right?
Yeah.
I mean, but it sounds like Nebraska's maybe going to be that way, where they can run the football, but they can also go 4 or 5 wide. The key, bud, is can they be good at all of it? Right? It's one thing. It's one thing to be multiple. It's another to be be good, right? What?
Brad will break that down this morning on Hail Varsity Radio. Oh God, yeah. We can report that they will call a pass play. They may call a run play. They may throw it to a receiver. They may
throw it to a DB. They may throw it to a DB. What we don't know is that they're good at any of those things. We'll find out. Because, I mean, if you think about it, Rutgers and their, non-heyday of recent times were also very multiple. UConn was also very multiple. You never knew if they were going to be terrible at throwing or terrible at running. You just knew they'd be terrible. Yeah.
It was amazing.
Good enough.
God. Are they going to be good? In fact, if you boil it down to its most simple form, that's really the question we're asking every single Saturday on this here radio show.
Do we?
And we're just trying to
survive.
Get to that. Is Nebraska going to be good at the sport? We'll see.
Could they be good for 4 quarters at the sport?
Oh. And it's interesting you bring up Oliver Martin, too, because wasn't it the Iowa game where he kind of pulled up? He pulled up on a I think it was a
Wisconsin
post.
game. It was a Wisconsin game.
Yeah, it was Wisconsin. You're right. Where he pulled up, and that led to the interception. It was one of the future, because you never know if it's the receiver or the quarterback. I mean, it's not like you never know. Sometimes you know. But that one you definitely knew. That was not on Adrian. Dude pulled up. And so as you were talking about how, maybe he was bummed out. He's dealing with that injury. It didn't seem right. And you were just sitting there God, does he want to play? It doesn't seem like he wants to play. He did not seem like he wanted to get to that ball.
Well, now it's a little bit clear. Oh, you really just gutted it out even trying to be out there. And when you physically couldn't do something or you were injured and it affected your ability to perform, here's your result, right? You throw the interception because you can't go get it. So it's a little rough. Baseball got a win, Kraynak. Did you celebrate last night?
I did watch some of it on BTN Plus. I accidentally renewed that subscription. I don't know if you have it.
I do
it's
not.
$120 a year or something like that. And it's one of those things, like if you don't cancel it, you're just going to renew. And it hit me. I was like, I guess, all right. I guess I got it for another year. It's not totally worth it, I'll be honest. Sorry, BTN Plus. But, but you do get those random games, right? Mm-hmm. And it's usually, so last night it was the Ohio State student production of the Nebraska-Ohio State game. So I did watch quite a bit of it. And, I mean, we could sit here and break down the Ohio State announcers' work. They need a little work. They need a little work. They were very excited about the school that they attend. But I'll tell you what.
Were they wearing sweater vests?
Yeah, it's, No,
were they? Were they wearing sweater vests?
I mean, it's likely. They didn't. I didn't see the stand-up. I don't know if they did a stand-up. I think it was just all. Yeah, I had a picture in my head of what they looked like, and one of them struck me as a sweater vest type. But regardless, look, you did get another solid outing from Shanaman, and I think we talked about this several weeks ago, where it's like that staff isn't settled, right? It's just not. But now. Okay, maybe it is starting to settle a little bit, because between Shanaman and Cody, you got a couple guys that are in the mid-threes ERA wise, so they're doing their job, right? They're doing their job, but it's just you speaking of being good on offense, yes, they have bats, yes, they do swing at pitches, but are they good at it? Do they actually get on base? Do they score runs? The answer is no. Like that is the very obvious problem. There are a few problems with the baseball team, but you're at least starting to get a little stability on the staff. You're starting to get some. I think it's like 5 straight good outings for Shanaman. Cody Frank, we'll see how he does tonight. And Ohio State's not a world beater, so he has a chance to, pump out 6 innings, maybe give up a couple runs. Give them a chance, but man, Nebraska leaves so many guys on base, and they just don't. Their big hitters aren't hitting well. God, I think your number 3 hitter is like 270.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? They're just not. They're not putting the ball in play. So they get thrown out. Stealing. It's just they cannot figure out what they're doing offensively right now. So. We'll see if they can round into form. Trust in Bolt, you should. But, this doesn't look like it's going to be one of those magical runs that you saw last year. This doesn't look like a team that's ready to go on the road and compete with Arkansas in a regional by any stretch.
Kraynak, what do you look at it as? Is it youth? The majority? I mean, first and foremost, there's a lot to reload. Okay, so that's rough. You have some vets that are scuffling with their new role, and then you have all 3 phases that are problematic at times. Offense can disappear, defense and taking care of the baseball's not great. It's been tough all year. And
that's been a surprise, too, because that's sort of a hallmark of a Will Bolt team.
It is. And then your pitching, like you mentioned, can be problematic. I just think the approach, and it's too bad when there's a compliment that's thrown out there. Hey, I think this team can have a little more power, right? I think they can hit some bombs this year. Well, just because you can do it, you're maybe pressing to make that your offense and its identity versus just kind of going with it. Baseball's so screwy with every pitch, with every at bat, just the mental intensity it's required. And Nebraska seems to be pressing from time to time. But they got the win. They hung on better than the alternative, clearly. Last weekend, a little bit dejecting after Friday's win. You drop the Saturday, Sunday. Ohio State's not incredible this year, but good for Nebraska to at least get off on the right foot. Maybe they settle down and just don't worry about the periphery. They just kind of grind away and find a groove. Maybe that's what this weekend can represent for Nebraska moving forward.
You would hope, man. It's just there's something with their approach at the plate too, and I think it is less on ability. Like if there's something on the approach that's maybe not sinking in right now with the team, where it's, and Will Bolt talked about it, I think after the Creighton game, about taking what the defense gives you, which you don't hear a lot about in baseball, at least in those terms. Those are like football terms that I think we can kind of relate with, where it's like, hey, you get a low outside pitch on a swinging count, like slap that thing the other way, right? It's just sort of, don't try to yank everything. Don't try to hit home runs all the time. Don't try to be the hero. Just put the ball in play, move the runners, right? Just kind of take yourself out of it. Don't try to just hit piss ropes all the time. Like take what the because you look at some of the stats, and like take Bryce Matthews, for instance, and I'm not doing this just to pick on him. Super talented shortstop. But dude, listen, I mean, 84 at-bats, 30 strikeouts. Like, man, that screams more approach than ability, because his ability is better than that, right? And from all accounts, he had a really good offseason of training, and he's in phenomenal shape and all those things. But, like, that's approach. He's better than that, right? Cam Chick, percentage-wise, even worse, right? He strikes out, like, almost 1 out of every 2 at-bats right now. That's approach. That's approach. Max Anderson, not a big strikeout guy, which is good, but this is a guy that put up serious numbers in the Cape Cod League, which is like, the preeminent college, off-season league. He performed really well there. He's only at 255 right now. That's a big-time hitter, Max Anderson. Very talented hitter. And he's barely, he's flirting with Mendoza. Like, and I think part of that too is, as much as the staff wasn't settled, the lineup really isn't either. And Bolt's been messing with that for a while. And when you take a Jackson Hallmark out of there, you take a Luke Roskam out of there, you take a Schwellenbach out of there, some of those guys had more protection, right? Max Anderson in particular had a much more protection in the lineup than he does this year, where he's now kind of the guy. So they're finding their way offensively. They are more talented and more capable than the numbers they're putting up. There's no question about that. But you got to figure out how to get through to them and how to get them to have a better approach, because their approach they're going up there with right now, for the most part, is not a good one. It's just not putting the ball in play. I mean, dude, they struck out. I think last night, what was it? Was it 16 strikeouts last night? 12?
I know the Ohio State starter, if you don't mind me jumping in, had 14 strikeouts in 7 innings. And Mark, I'll talk to you, because I got a chance to watch just a little bit of the game on BTN Plus, not the full game. But like what you're saying is ringing 100% true here, where it almost feels like immaturity at bat for some of these guys. Where, I mean, last night, how many times did you see that Ohio State starter throw breaking pitches at the Huskers and they were swinging over the top of them? It's at some point in the game, you'd think the Huskers would realize, oh, this guy's throwing a whole bunch of get me over curveballs. Let's sit on the curveball, and if he beats us with a fastball, so be it. But you never saw it. It just looked like the Huskers kept on going up there, hoping for a fastball, hoping for something they could drive, whenever the Ohio State pitcher just kept on throwing breaking pitch after breaking pitch, and then on a 1-2 count or an 0-2 count, he'd throw that high fastball, and the Husker batters would swing right underneath it and fall for that high cheese. It was just... as Mark's saying, I'm just going to echo everything he's saying. It feels like immaturity for some of these approaches at bat, and you wonder if that'll improve as the year goes on. Because I mean, right now the Huskers only hitting .241 as a team, which isn't what you want. Isn't what is going to make you successful in the Big Ten.
Real quick, you look at opponents' baseball. 11 errors the last 2 games. Nebraska had a gift-wrapped opportunity against Creighton, couldn't make it happen. Nebraska 4 for 31 with runners in scoring position, to both of your points about maturity and at bat. A quick timeout. We will rewind next and hear from the good doctor, Rob Zatechka, part of the pipeline. Get his take on Raiola, get his thoughts on the Nebraska offensive approach. Weekend edition, it's Hail Varsity. We're presented by the Nebraska Lottery.
Hello, listener. Hey, it's Chris Schmidt with Hail Varsity Radio, and I wanted to let you know about a special deal just for listeners of the Hail Varsity Radio Show podcast. We're offering $10 off the annual subscription price of $29.99. That means that you, for less than $20, can get everything we do. 10 issues of our monthly magazine, our annual football yearbook, and all the premium content we produce at HailVarsity.com. Just go to HailVarsity.com/subscribe and enter in the promo code GBR for $10 off a full year of Hail Varsity. That's HailVarsity.com/subscribe, promo code GBR.
Early to rise with Hail Varsity Radio, the voice of Husker Nation. Here's Chris Schmidt and Mark Kraynak.
Back into it, it's Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. A week from today, we will be at the Single Barrel inside the Graduate. We'll probably eat thousands of pounds of steak and beef, and it'll be an incredible thing on Spring Game Eve. We welcome in Husker Hall of Famer, NFL vet, and part of the pipeline, great offensive lineman, the pride of Lincoln East, Dr. Rob Zatechka, his podcast with Travis Justice, Doc Talk, and it is awesome. It's must listen to. Dr. Rob, brother, it's good to spend some time with you. How you living?
I'm well. How are you guys doing today?
Man, we're good. We are so good, and waiting for the spring game, obviously, and you lived a lot of them. Level of excitement, my friend, in your career for the spring game. Was it just another practice? Was it a chance to show yourself, or was it, all right, somewhere in between? How did you process those moments, those opportunities?
It was always kind of lukewarm for me. I mean, just from our perspective as players, it was always, the way spring ball worked, you'd have usually three practices during the week and then a Saturday scrimmage. And the spring game, I mean, functionally and really kind of the way we ran it, it was essentially nothing other than it was that last scrimmage of spring ball is all it was. You had 2 or 3 practices that last week. The spring game was that last Saturday scrimmage, and that was it. And, I mean, you wanted to go out, you wanted to perform, but at the same time, you wanted to do that for all the other 3 Saturday scrimmages of spring football as well, too. And so, I never really looked at it as something all that special. Now, on the flip side, as much as, they made a little bit of a big deal about it back then as well, too. I mean, it was the spring game. It wasn't billed as a scrimmage. They billed it as the spring game. But in truth, it was just that last scrimmage. Now, if we had 10,000 people show up for a spring game, 92, 93, 94, sometime around then, well, that was kind of a big deal. So it wasn't like it is now where you're basically doing a full dress rehearsal for a regular season game, and you're going to have 60 to 80,000 people in the stands. You just didn't have that then. I mean, I think there a few years there we had, 14 to 18,000 people for the spring game, and that was kind of a big deal. So it wasn't something you got super excited about. It was a Saturday scrimmage, and a few extra people showed up to watch. That was about it.
Rob Zatechka with us, Hail Varsity Radio, talking spring football a week away. Dr. Rob, let's get into the Nebraska offense. What do you want to see in 2022? Not just next weekend, but Whipple, you have new staff on offense. Of course, Bush and special teams. I think there's some excitement there, but as a proud Husker, what are you interested in this offense maybe getting better at, or even becoming under Whipple's guidance and some more collaboration?
I'm not sure I want to see a drastic change in system as much as I want to just see effectiveness. I want to see things cleaned up. One of the big things I've harped on the last several years, I mean, this is even going back to maybe some of the Pelini era, especially when Mike Riley was the coach, and really we've seen it under Frost, is kind of these little mistakes you see all over the place. The turnovers, the penalties, the special teams miscues. That's the kind of stuff I want to see cleaned up. And with this new group of coaches, you want to see a group of coaches that puts a lot of emphasis on doing those little things right, on that attention to detail. That's what I want to see. I want to see that out of the offensive line under Donovan Raiola. You want to see it under the offense as a whole under Mickey Joseph and Whipple. If they clean up that stuff, that's going to make a bigger difference than any new system you're going to come in with. I mean, you can have the greatest offensive system in the history of football, but if you're turning the ball over 3 or 4 times a game, it doesn't matter. If you're leading the conference in penalties, that doesn't matter. If you're having a bunch of special teams miscues week in and week out, and teams are scoring off of those special teams mistakes, your bright, shiny new offensive system doesn't matter. So I want to see those little things cleaned up. I want to see them practice and scrimmage without penalties, without mistakes, without turnovers. And if they can do that, that's where I'm going to find a sense of excitement, because those were the things that really were shooting Nebraska in the foot last year.
A lot's been made about firing off the ball, and Donnie Raiola, assistant coach for the Bears, cut his teeth at Wisconsin, Donovan well. And, we were not anti-Greg Austin at all, but from your perspective, just what can be different with the same talent on this offensive line? You mentioned the cleaning up, yes, obviously. And that's a big part of it. The times I've talked to Raiola, very, very, very detail-oriented guy. Okay. And those are the kind of guys you need as offensive line coaches. It's those guys looking at those 1,000,001 little things that they know you're never going to be able to deliver perfection, but that's the expectation. That's the goal. And he's the kind of guy that wants that. He's a technician. He wants that attention to detail. He wants to see that. There's been a lot of talk about the new technique. In my mind, that's what we did from day one. It's not like this is some. I'm not sure the word I'm even looking for here. It's not some new innovative blocking technique or style that he's instituting. He's just moving away from, for a while there's been kind of a fad. You saw it kind of start at the NFL levels, where there wasn't this big push to maybe move the offensive or move the defensive line backwards, i.e. driving off the ball and the power style of run blocking. It was more kind of screening guys off. You kind of create a lane and you sort of shield. Picture basketball players playing defense. You sort of shield that running lane from the defenders. And it's not a very aggressive style of blocking. The problem with that is that if you have a breakdown anywhere, if somebody gets physically beaten anywhere along the offensive line, that system where you're kind of shielding guys off completely collapses. You beat one guy, you've defeated the entire play. So that's one thing I didn't like about it. It kind of works at the NFL level. If you got 5 NFL caliber offensive linemen, you can make that type of system work and work fairly well. You just got to have 5 NFL caliber offensive linemen, and that's just not what Nebraska has right now. I don't know if Alabama or Georgia have that, and they don't run that kind of system. They use the kind of, like I said, the more aggressive zone blocking schemes where you're firing off the ball and you're truly trying to move those defensive linemen backwards. So I like it just because it kind of goes back to something I'm a little bit more familiar with, and the fact that
somebody from the 90s is familiar with it and likes it doesn't mean it's right. But there's an effectiveness to it. I mean, it works. And a little bit of the plug-and-play we had on the offensive line at that time, where you could have 4 seniors, and, I mean, you'll throw a redshirt freshman or sophomore in there to get a few snaps, a couple series in, to get some experience. It works because there's a little bit more forgiveness when you're pushing defensive linemen backwards. I mean, if a D lineman, if one guy blows up the play, but the other 3 or 4 guys are pushing their guys a yard and a half backwards, that running back can get tackled and still fall forward 2 or 3 yards, and you at least get something out of the play. You don't have that with that system where you kind of screen guys off. So I hope they stick with it. I hope it stays like that because it's a very aggressive blocking style. It's an aggressive blocking system, and it works well. So we like to see that. I mean, us old 90s guys like to see that at least.
Rob Zatechka is with us here on Hail Varsity Radio. And Rob, would you say it's fair to say that not only is this more of an effective style, but I think it's also a style that is more conducive to the bodies Nebraska has along the offensive line. Those 6'6", 6'7" mauler types, that's what they want to do. They want to fire off the ball and really get into a defensive lineman and push him back. Is that fair?
Yeah, well, kind of, sort of. I think it is. I mean, the subset of guys that I worry about a little bit are the 6'8", 6'9" guys. And the reason I say that is because those are the guys that have, I mean, you hit a point where it's just geometry and physics. I mean, you take a guy that's that tall, it's sometimes hard for a guy that tall to get low enough to the ground to generate the leverage needed. One of the things that I thought was really, really impressive about Teddy Prohaska last year, he's one of the very few guys like that. He's one of the few 6'9" dudes who can literally get enough ankle, knee, and hip bend to drop his level low enough that he can generate leverage against a 6'3" defensive lineman. Not a lot of 6'9" guys can do that. And that's something that I worry about because he's coming back from that it was a pretty bad knee injury. Mm-hmm. Coming back from a really bad ACL tear, is he still going to have that ability to do that when he comes back from that injury? And can a guy like that stay injury-free? Because I think he's hands down the most talented guy on the offensive line.
Rob Zatechka with us, few minutes, Hail Varsity Radio, offensive line thoughts, spring football, week away from the spring game. Dr. Rob, do you like the talent and the options Raiola has? There's some guys that we're not going to get to see due to injury you just touched on, but you have a room full of bodies, and you've, on paper, recruited well, right? I mean, you got to find a center with Cam. So talk to me about what you project, not necessarily the starters today in ink, but just do they have 5 to 7 guys that they can lean on, a backup guard, a backup swing tackle, a center? Can they be loaded up and gel?
On paper, they've got the raw talent. I mean, there's some of these guys we haven't seen a ton of, like Henry Litovsky. Mm-hmm. That's a guy that I'm really excited. That's a huge human being. And he's not one of those 6'9" guys. I mean, he's like 6'5", 6'6". But, man, that is a freaking beast of a body. I mean, that is a big guy, strong guy, and he's very explosive. Mm. And he's a guy that you're looking at that I would think at the 10 of those inner 3 positions, the guard spots, the center spot, that I'd love to see how he fits into the picture going in. Now you've got a nice mix of guys up and down the ranks as far as some young guys. You got some guys who are going to be seniors that can fit in there. You mentioned the center position. I mean, that's something that still kind of sticks in my craw a little bit, that they just don't have a really good true center on the team right now. That's kind of emerged from the lineup that they're going to, okay, here's our center for the fall. They haven't really tabbed that guy yet. I've got some frustration because I don't even know if he'd still have eligibility, but you had A.J. Forbes, who's a Bellevue West kid. So you got a local Nebraska kid who, my understanding was, is kind of, I don't know if he was flat out told this or if it was more just sort of a writing on the wall kind of thing, where he essentially was told, you know what, you're only 6'2" or 6'3", you're never going to play here. And so he transfers. He kind of became sort of the negative of Samori Toure, where he leaves Nebraska and goes up to Montana and becomes a two-time All-American center at Montana.
Jeez.
So, but that's the kind of guy that I look at, like, good Lord, it'd be nice to have him back in Lincoln this year. And I don't know if he'd still have an extra year of COVID eligibility. But that's the kind of guy that you'd look at, that you'd love to have on the roster still, just because kind of a mean dude, good athlete, perfect size. I mean, sort of that 6'2", 6'3", 295, can move and has a nasty streak, very athletic alignment. But that's the kind of loss that I bemoan here when I look at the last couple of years, because I'm looking now and going, it's like, you know, we really needed somebody behind Cam who could pick up that slack and play that center position. And it's an important position. I mean, we saw how that went when Cam was still working on the snapping problems. You have a little bit of a breakdown at that center position, it kills an entire play. And so that was a big focus when Osborne Tennifer, Dan Young, when those guys were running the show. You always had a center. You always had a backup center. You always had a couple of guys that could fill that role, and that was something that there's a massive emphasis on. And I think Nebraska needs to get back to that, putting that emphasis on that position and having an All-American caliber guy who can fill that role, because we saw how big a difference maker could be when Cam was a little bit off. And if they find a guy, great. It's just I'm not sure who they're really locking into right now at that position.
A few more minutes here with Rob Zatechka. And Rob, I mean, the guys in the offensive line are obviously very important for a running game and a passing game. We saw that last season whenever the offensive line struggled. It really felt like the offense as a whole struggled, and that's, I guess, the story of football. But I want to get your take on the other guys that make the running game tick. Those are the running backs. We saw from Ramir Johnson as well as Jaquez Yant last season. Now it sounds like Anthony Grant's being added to the room, and he's impressed the coaches. I just want to get your take with what we saw from the running backs last season and what kind of improvement we need from them in this upcoming season in order to have an effective running game.
I mean, consistency is the big thing. I mean, and a lot of that does start up front with the line, the blocking. Where you're going to need to see an effective passing game, because as much as I'd love to just say, you know, we're just going to run the ball all day and do nothing else, you do have to be able to kind of get a defense to pull a few guys out of the box a little bit. You can't put 9 guys up there and hope you're going to have success running against that play in and play out. You got to have that passing threat. And so I do think they'll have that with the system that Whipple and Mickey Joseph want to get rolling with there. From the running back spot, again, you want to see that consistent performance. We haven't seen that over the last time we saw it was year 1 under Frost with Zigbo. Mm-hmm. I mean, you had a guy who really dedicated himself in the off season. That he was basically, hey, I'm going to make myself the man going into that my senior year. You look at some of these guys where they're talking about the off-season work that guys like Yant have put in up to this point, and I hope to see that pay off with a little bit of consistency. I think you got 3 or 4 guys on that roster, any of who could be that primary running back, that first, second, third down guy. I hope we see some consistency out of it, because I think when you see a consistent running game, you do have a guy that you kind of lean on a bit. In my opinion, the last time Nebraska had a really good, consistent running game was, in fact, Zigbo's senior year. And it's because you had a guy that, one, he was consistent, and the team felt like they could rely on him in terms of giving him those 20 carries a game, getting that 100-plus yards a game, getting that 1,000-yard season. the reason those numbers, that 20 yards, the 20 carries a game, the 100 yards a game, the 1,000 yards a season, the reason those are kind of your good, solid benchmarks for a solid running back and a decent running offense is because if you could do that, it does put a ton of pressure on a defense. It does wear a defense out. You start not being able to rush for 100 yards a game. Also, the defense knows it's passing time, and we can sort of pin our ears back and get after it. And using that running game to soften that defense up. I know one of the stats that got thrown out there recently is that, Nebraska's quarterbacks were under pressure, 42% of their dropbacks this past year. If you've got a consistent running game and they know that draw threat is there, they know that running back potential is there, it softens that defense up. That defense maybe has to sit back on their heels a little bit. You've got to watch for those draw plays. You've got to watch for that running back coming out of the backfield on a screen pass. You got to pay attention to that a little bit more, and you can't just pin your ears back and get after the quarterback as much. And I think it makes a huge difference in terms of that overall effectiveness of the offense.
Rob Zatechka with us, Husker Hall of Famer, part of the Pipeline, NFLer, The Good Doctor, and his podcast, Doc Talk, with Travis Justice. Wherever you tune into pods, check out Dr. Rob and Travis. Great stuff on Husker football. Dr. Rob, I know it's almost Miller time, my friend, so we'll get your beer pick for this spring. But you're in the medical field for sure. Dr. Rob, you quote tweeted this. Thoughts on old Fleck, the boat rower? What the before and after picture, my friend? Any commentary?
I think he had a little eyelid. What do they call it? A blepharoplasty done, where I think he basically had a lid lift. Is what it looks like to me.
What about wearing a suit after a spring game?
Yeah, either that or it's a different dude. But it's PJ, but he definitely had some work done. Which, hey, good for him if you want to keep up that baby face, but. I'm one of those guys. Now, there's functional reasons to do that. If you've got somebody who's got a little bit of a lid leg where your eyelids are actually – you can have some people where your eyelids actually have enough excess tissue. They kind of hang down and can impede your vision a little bit.
Gotcha.
If there was more of a deal where he either did a lift or he did a little bit of Botox to create a more youthful appearance, the problem with those procedures, in my mind, it's not so much, they don't necessarily make you look younger. They make you look like you had a procedure done. That's what they look like. I mean, nobody looks at you and goes like, you had a facelift. Oh, my gosh, you look so much younger. You look great. Nobody ever says that. You get a facelift, people look at you and go like, you had a facelift. And you look like you had a facelift. That's all they ever say about it. So.
Cosmetic or functional, right? What's the answer?
Exactly.
Here? Well, if we run into him,
nobody ever looked at Jerry Jones and went like, you had a facelift. You look so much younger. Everybody in Dallas looked at Jerry Jones and goes, you look like you got a facelift, and you look like you got a facelift. That's it.
We may wait.
Look at Flex. He looks like he had some kind of lift procedure done. That's it.
We may have to wade into those waters with old PJ at media days. So, set it straight. Page, stay across the table, my friend. Don't come over the table. So, what are you sipping on here? What is Dr. Rob's beer of choice this spring?
Oh, my God. I'm still hooked on these New England hazy IPAs. I just can't get it. I can't get enough of those things. I'm in kind of a really bad rut with them. So I've been kind of hitting those pretty frequently. I mean, up here in Omaha, we've got cross strain. So I've been hitting cross strain pretty hard with they got the whole Fairy Nectar lineup of a whole bunch of different ones, and they're all good. The other place that I've been hitting that has a couple of really, really good hazy IPAs I like is Pint 9 Brewing up here in Omaha. They do just an absolutely outstanding job. If I'm in Lincoln, I go down to my friends at Cosmic Eye. They've got some great ones. So they got a Citra that's just outstanding.
Well, we'll check her out. Rob Zatechka, Husker Hall of Famer, part of the pipeline. Some insight on spring ball and facelifts and all that good stuff, and of course beer. Dr. Rob, we'll cheers soon, my friend. Thanks for a few minutes.
Sounds good. You guys have a great afternoon.
Pardon the interruption, but I'd like to save you some money. Hey, it's Chris Schmidt with Hail Varsity, and I wanted to offer listeners of this podcast $10 off the price of an annual subscription. That means that you, for less than $20, can get everything we produce. 10 issues of our monthly magazine, our annual football yearbook, and all the premium content we produce at HailVarsity.com. Just go to HailVarsity.com/subscribe and enter in the promo code GBR for $10 off a full year of Hail Varsity. That's HailVarsity.com/subscribe, promo code GBR.
The Hail Varsity Radio Saturday morning show, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Strap yourselves in. Here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt.
Y'all don't even know he was a virgin until he's 28, and now, roll tide.
And Mark Kraynak.
Time has come for someone to put his foot down. And that foot is me.
Welcome to an hour two. Back with you here, Hail Varsity Radio Weekend, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Chris Schmidt, Mark Kraynak, Elijah Herbel. So the kid is up. He's getting ready for baseball practice. The dogs are fed. And we're ready to dive in here as we're a week away from spring game 2022. Numbers to get in, 466-377-6800, 825-5865. Can find us on Twitter at Schmidt_radio, Chris Schmidt at Hail Varsity, at Herbal Essence, and someday Kraynak will get that Twitter handle back. A Twitter you got to follow is Brandon Vogel with HailVarsity.com and magazine. Managing editor, author with John Cook. Dream Like a Champion at Brandon L. Vogel. So can you guys hear the German Shepherd in the backyard with their squeaky toy?
No.
Cannot.
I can. Okay. I can, but I've been listening to you for the past 15 minutes just in case you wanted to say something important to me. So I've been hearing the dog going to town on the squeaky toy. Yeah, I thought there was a small animal dying in your home, actually.
Is Chris yet to say anything important to you?
That's going on years. Do not put him on the spot like that.
I mean,
the silence says everything.
Yeah, during a Saturday morning show, usually Schmitty's pretty quiet.
Yeah, I have my coffee. Vogues, do you have your coffee? Do you have something on the smoker yet? How are you doing this weekend?
I'm doing pretty well. I do have some coffee. No smoker plans for this weekend, which is, I guess, an oversight on my part.
That's all right. I mean, there's a lot to sift through with the depth discussion, right? Let's go there to start off with spring football and great opportunity. That's been the silver lining. That's been the talk this week. Yeah, it's not good that guys are injured or some key names are out, Vogues, but the opportunity's knocking for a lot of guys, young and maybe even experienced within the program, experienced as in multiple years here, but maybe you haven't seen or heard from some of these guys.
Yeah, I mean, I continue to love how direct and to the point Mark Whipple is with these things. You know, he's asked about missing some key pieces, and he essentially said, he's like, well, we know those guys are good. They'll be fine. And really, even if you had some of those players, and you know, there are some players like Thomas Fedoni where hasn't been able to play a ton of football yet at the college level, where you'd like to see, even if you're, you know, relatively solid in your evaluation of his talent, you'd like to see players like that get some reps. But for some of these veterans who, you know, have played a lot of football and are not participating in the spring, yeah, I think it's probably okay there. But really, minus those veteran players, I don't know that this spring would have been drastically different. Like, I kind of look at Nebraska going into 2022 as there's a lot that's unsettled out there, and this is gonna be a season where, you know, for really, I think to the greatest degree of the Frost era, we're going to see a lot of new names, and exciting. It's also probably a little bit nerve-wracking if you're trying to evaluate Nebraska's true team strength going into 2022, but it's just kind of where they're at. You know, they leaned on veteran talent for quite a while there, and eventually the bill comes due. You're going to have one of these turnover type of years where the roster's just full of a lot of guys who have yet to have a chance to prove themselves. So here we are. It'll make for an interesting day next Saturday.
Brandon, we half jokingly talked at the beginning of the show today about how Nebraska we know is going to be multiple under Whipple. They might run, they might pass, they might run with the quarterback. The question is, will they be good at any of it? And so it's a really basic fundamental question. I recognize that. But let's handicap it from where you sit. The percent chance that Nebraska is good at offense coming into next year.
How good would you say they've been the past 2-3 seasons? To set a baseline, because I mean, I'd say there's a 65% chance they're good at offense next year, and that's because for me, I think they've been pretty good at offense. They've just had these kind of like embarrassing kill switch moments that have been a little bit too frequent. They move the ball pretty consistently. The run game hasn't been as strong as I think they need it to be, or they'd like it to be. But overall, in terms of moving the football, like I think they'll be pretty good. They'll be in the top half of the country. So that's kind of where I land at 65%.
Vogues,
there you have it, Chris. It's settled. That was your ultimate question right? This morning.
Yeah, are you going to be good at any of it? And to dive a little further, what do you think they'll be best at, Vogues, if we're going to continue this handicapping exercise? Is it going to be the run game that steps up and maybe resembles a little bit closer to year one, just kind of piggybacking off of what Dr. Rob Zatechka was talking about? You have that back paired with a decent O-line when we think about Farmer and Foster, right? Where Nebraska had a 1,000-yard back, and you know, it wasn't all quarterback heavy because you had a guy that seized that job. You've got candidates to seize the running back job. You don't know where the offensive line's going to be, but you're working hard this spring to identify some guys that are healthy that you think can help. And then you got to get the guys that are injured to come back healthy, and you plug them back in if they are your best options. Is it the run game you lean on? Do you think it's the receiving core and your new quarterback, Casey Thompson, or whoever wins that job? If you were to place your bets, Bud, where would you go? Would it be the run game, or would it be through the air?
Yeah, at this point, I'd probably make the passing game the favorite in terms of, you know, which of those two things is going to be better, you know, day one in Dublin. So I think part of that is Casey Rogers. Part of that is where Nebraska has been. The passing game has kind of been their strong relative strength the past couple of years. And with the run game, there's two moving pieces there. One, you've got to have somebody emerge that can be, you know, even like a Divine Ezigbo type of back, who it's clear like he's your best back, your biggest threat back there, and you know he's not going to take all of the carries, but he's going to take the majority of them. We don't know who that guy is for Nebraska right now, and also where we saw the offensive line last year. And I'm kind of bullish on that group based on what we're hearing so far, and just what we've heard from Raiola a little bit this spring. But there's just you got to get both pieces, both parts of that need to get better before I'm ready to say the run game is going to be how Nebraska wins football games in 2022. There's just there's still a lot of unknowns. I mean, we're talking about you're down 3 of your top 4 receivers from last year, still a talented group, and you got a new quarterback. But I'd still, factoring all that in, I give the passing game a slight leg up at this very early stage.
Does Nebraska have to land defensive line depth in the transfer portal before next year?
Probably. I mean, they're out there, and they get in the mix for a lot of these defensive linemen that have gone into the portal already and haven't hit on one yet. But I think they're going to keep trying, and it's like D-line recruiting out of high school. Those guys are always in high demand. So you got to have a pretty good pitch, and you got to find the right fit. But I think if they could get an experienced player in there just to help with the depth piece of it, much less, a lot of the kind of plug-and-play defensive linemen have already found their new homes. Who knows? I think there'll be a second wave of kind of transfer portal activity after the spring game. See what that shakes out for Nebraska. But, yeah, I think they need a little help up front there. They've got some good pieces, some guys that have been building, I think, and need to be your leaders. But, just hearing the way that Dawson kind of talked about Nash Hutmacher, I mean, you look at that spot in the middle there, and we know, they'll probably be more of a four-man front this year. And he's kind of the guy you can point to and be like, yeah, he fits there. And Dawson's basically like, weight room numbers are awesome. We're still bringing along the on-field part of it, and that's okay. He's a young player still at this stage, but kind of lets you know where they're at, particularly on the interior of that defensive line.
Vogues, it's a stark reality in the Big Ten with just how good your lines of scrimmage have to be. And you look at some teams that, as a Nebraska fan, you'd like to think you can line up and just hammer, and it's not been easy, and it's not been the case. Look at the neighborhood you're in. Look at what Fleck's done with their lines of scrimmage, both offense and defense. Look at Iowa consistently, right? And then even Northwestern in some past years has had some guys that made it a long Saturday for Nebraska with Northwestern's defensive lines, and not household name guys, but guys that would end up winning on a Saturday, and then even now with Illinois. And the specialty with Bielema is offensive line recruitment and development. That's a tough picture when we're talking about, okay, and you think Robinson's ready to take that step as year two as being the man on the interior. Casey Rogers, health permitting, has really shown well. And then you've got Tanner and Garrett off the edge, and then, okay, there's a bunch of young dudes, Roquan and Tariq and the other dude, and it's escaping me, who's just a massive of a man.
Jalen Weaver.
Weaver, thanks. I mean, you've got the bodies, but you can't fast track this. So portal is going to be key, and I don't know. It just sounds to me like maybe the D-line might be a year away. If you're asking guys to step up and fill vital roles this early in their career.
Yeah, it definitely could be. And, that might be the reality of the situation. Does it match up with kind of the reality facing Nebraska's football program going into this year? We'll see. I mean, having watched Nebraska in the Big Ten for, a decade plus now, like it's become pretty clear. You're going to have a hard time being good in the Big Ten if you're average on both of those lines. And it's particularly tough in the Big Ten, I think, because if you have the seventh best offensive line in the league, you might be the 24th, 25th, 26th best O-line in the country, but you're still dead average in terms of the conference. And you got to play 9 games against those teams. And, in 2021, you see a season where the schedule breaks the way that it does, and it was just kind of a never-ending parade of elite pass rushers. And you might face that, flip that equation around, you might face 8 of the 9 best offensive lines in the country. And that's just the reality of the Big Ten. And when we look at Nebraska and its inability to have consistent success in the league post-Bo Pelini, I think a lot of it comes down to that. It's not that all of those O-lines and all of those D-lines have been average or worse, but on you look at all 10, 11, 12 years together, Nebraska is in the middle of the pack there. So it's going to be hard, I think, for the Huskers to kind of get where they need to go until those two lines come up and are more consistently in the top third of the league than, say, middle of the pack.
All that said, going back to the defensive line, it's really going to come down to health, because you go back to 2009 and